I am John. Some of you I've met already who've come in to see me. I've answered your emails, but yes, this is the face behind the advice. And of course, you're welcome to carry on and communicate with me after this webinar. I appreciate that the planning process and undertaking postgrad study is pretty scary, and our website is sometimes not the easiest to find your way around. So keep those questions coming. So the format for today's webinar is we have a panel of experts, of super brains who are currently studying with us, some who have left us and who are high functioning, high achieving humans in other research fields. So we'll be hearing from them. And really the focus of the discussion today is going to be learning about, I guess, the postgrad student experience and the realities of undertaking postgrad study. Some people will be doing it on campus. We have people who are doing it with us who are studying by distance. So you can ask some questions about that. You may have some specific program questions, and some of those questions we'll be able to answer based on the types of degrees that our panelists are doing. We haven't got representatives from every degree because that would be a little bit challenging. So if we don't have a panelist from who's studying the degree that you're interested in, that's okay. You can still ask us questions. Okay, so I think I will start this conversation off by introducing our panelists, and then we're going to start with you, Lara, and have you tell us a bit about your story, your experience of study, and the things that you were sharing with me when we just got started. I think it's a great story. But first, I'll just introduce everybody, and then we'll get on to Lara's story, and then we'll go to Rhiannon, then Lachlan, and then Alzena. How does that sound? Great. I see this amazing chorus of yes, that is incredible. Lara, let's introduce you first. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Lara. Hi, kia ora.
Great. Lara is our Master of Information Studies, right? I got that correct. So Lara is going to talk about her experience studying online, what's involved in that program, and some of the experiences that have led to where she is today. Not that we mind this, Lara is down in Dunedin at the moment working for Otago University, which is also quite good. But we can reflect on that later on. You're still working for Victoria at the same time though, so thanks. Rhiannon, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name's Rhiannon, and my undergrad is in science, and I decided to do business analysis. I got a job at the Department of Conservation when I got out of uni for the first time, and I started working there, and I kind of fell in love with improvement projects. If you work for any government department, you'll quickly realize that there are a lot of problems to be solved. And one of my favorite parts of my job was getting involved in that problem solving, and I realized that that's what I wanted to do for a career. So I looked up all these different options, talked to all the people who were leading the projects which I was getting involved with, and settled on the Masters of Professional Business Analysis at Vic. And I was planning to go to study in person, but of course COVID kind of took an axe to that plan. So I'm currently still living in Hamilton, which is where I've been for the last 7 years, and hoping to get to Wellington next year to finish off my degree with my amazing classmates in real life.
Okay, wow, that's a pretty amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. We'll be coming back to you with lots of questions about that program. Lachlan, you are next on my list. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Kia ora koutou. My name's Lachlan. I did my undergraduate in commerce, studying marketing and commercial law. I then decided to continue my studies with a Master of Commerce focused in marketing. I'll tell you more about it later. Overall, I really enjoyed it because it was sort of all round and a lot of research based, which helped me with my job, which I've recently got as a policy analyst in the Ministry for Primary Industries, where I perform a market research function. So it's nice for me, and hopefully the value I'll offer is the academic side as well as what it's like in the real world. Yeah, so I look forward to talking to you later.
Awesome, thanks Lachlan, and it'll be great to learn more about your research too for anybody who's attending this webinar who's thinking about, well, should I do a taught program or should I focus on a long-term research project, and how might that influence my career decisions afterwards? Alzena, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Alzena, in case you haven't heard my name twice already. I am pursuing my master's in professional accounting at Victoria University of Wellington, and I'm currently based in Wellington. So God's with me on that part. I have been a master's in commerce, and I've done my undergrad in commerce. That's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to come back to everybody with some questions, but now I'm going full circle back to Lara in Dunedin, live from Dunedin. And Lara, I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your story of how you became involved in the Master of Information Studies, and share with us a bit of that sort of learning journey and that experience as a Ms. student, as we call you, with us.
Yes. So I was finishing up my PhD, and they kind of lost my PhD. It went walkies. It was sent to Australia rather than England, and I was coming to the end of my publishing bursary, and I was going, what do I do next? I have nothing. And so I enrolled in the Masters of Information Studies because I thought, why not? It was a professional program. I had already attained a Masters of Arts in Child and Youth Studies, and I wanted to do something sort of professional that kind of complemented what I'd done as an undergrad. So I had my history, English and classical studies, and I had a passion for research. I also had a passion for history. So yeah, that's sort of how I came to start my journey, and I've loved it. I double majored in records management and archives, and also library sciences.
Wow,
So,
that's quite a study journey.
yes,
Yeah,
it was.
And how did you find, because the Master of Information Studies, of course, is one of the programs that Victoria University has had that's been delivered online for some time. So how did you find that as a method of learning as a student? Because obviously you'd done your PhD, and that's very much an on-campus based thing. So some people might be quite new to the whole online learning reality. How did you find it?
I found it amazing. I always sort of, through my research journey, has always sort of been quite isolated, because you know, with your PhD, you're living with your PhD, you're writing your PhD in your little bubble, but somehow the online journey, the community that's created online, you don't feel isolated at all.
Okay.
Even though you're in your room, or you're in your own little bubble still, but you have this community to draw on, which was amazing. And I mean, because they have been an online course for so long, that it just flows. There were no sort of hiccups at their end. Yeah, it was amazing. I really enjoyed it. I almost felt, because they were small classes, that they were more approachable online. You know, it was like we're doing face-to-face anyway, so one-on-one, it almost felt like, but with the community of learners within your classrooms. So yeah.
Cool. I like the reflection there about it still felt like a community even though you're online.
Can I just jump on the end of that? So
That would be great.
I did 2 papers in my last semester of my undergrad through Massey University, and I felt super disconnected from everyone. I didn't know anyone else in my class at all, never had the ability to kind of get to know them or speak to them or form study groups. But even though I've been doing the Masters of Professional Business Analysis online, I'm like best friends with everyone in my class. Like really,
Great.
We have a group chat, we talk to each other nonstop, we have study groups with each other. We had an end of year or end of trimester drinks last trimester, and I actually flew from Hamilton to Wellington just to hang out with them all. So it's really social, and even with the lecturers and stuff, we had a Friday afternoon class last trimester, and our lecturer would always stick around for 10 to 15 minutes at the end of that class just to have some banter with us, which was really awesome. And it was just, even though we were doing everything through Zoom and Microsoft Teams, we were still super connected, which is something that I hadn't experienced in previous online learning. And I was so anxious when I heard that the course was going to be delivered online, but like, I absolutely love it. Also, I can go to classes in my onesie.
Yeah. Which I'm sure
Yes,
would have been a
I'm-
question from everybody. Thank you. Yes, you can go to classes in your onesie. Thank you for that detail, that very Hamilton-esque detail, Rhiannon.
I even in fact met up with I worked with some of my online colleagues too, so in archives, and we met up for coffees, and yeah, it helps. So in the MISS program, you're encouraged to sort of become a student member of ARANZ, which is New Zealand Archiving, or LIANZA, which is New Zealand Libraries, so that you're part of the professional community as well, and you're welcomed into the professional community as a student. And there's very much that online as well in the classes, is that you're becoming part of a professional community, and so therefore you're being welcomed into that community.
Yeah, that's awesome feedback. And I think people who are attending this may have questions about online learning that relates to other programs. So we're definitely going to be able to answer those questions for you. Lachlan, I'm going to put this conversation over to you now, just to give us a little bit of a story about your experiences around doing your master's research, and just reflecting on, I think you said you got a scholarship, didn't you, where you got a particular work placement. But anyway, yours is very much an on-campus, connected to Wellington kind of study experience. So it'd be great to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So that's right. Before I talk about my scholarship, I got through a class because we had a guest speaker come in who I talked to afterwards, who then encouraged me to apply for a role on the Advertising Standards Authority. So that was a sort of nice CV builder and experience builder for me personally in getting me into the professional world. And although that was in an undergraduate. From that, I then got a scholarship through Vic, a summer scholarship. So it's available to undergraduate and postgraduate students to work at the Ministry for Primary Industries, which is where I work now. Following that, I applied for a job here, and I've got it, which was largely because of what I was studying and the research element of that. So although my research in postgrad is focused on marketing, what I'm doing in a professional sense is market research, but a lot of the inner workings are the same because you're still applying research methodologies. It's just in a different context. So the skills are very much transferable if you're interested in asking those sort of why questions or the what if and how does something work. So in my on-campus experience, again, I was disrupted by COVID-19 as well, but in the first semester or trimester, you do 2 research-based papers, which teach you essentially research methodologies. So there's a more quantitative and a more qualitative. They together form a really good foundation, which helps the way that you view the world and that you view problems rather than just being a sort of technical, box ticking exercise you have to do to move on. You also get to focus on what you want to study. So for me, it was a marketing course, and they encourage that you get a more diverse sort of background. So I also did an international business course, which was a lot of fun. And then for my course that I'm enrolled in, we also had to do a management course, which was it allowed you scope to focus on your discipline. So if you were interested in doing information systems, you could focus on that. For me, I focused with a marketing lens, and others focused on international business or management. The lecturers were really good. It was great to interact with them. We went online for a period as well through COVID. I enjoyed that slightly less, but it was still beneficial, and it was still worthwhile. but the lecturers that I've had from my experience were really good. They care about what they do. They're there to do postgrad because it's sort of what interests them in their research. So if you can engage with the subject matter and really become engaged with what you want to do, it really helps, because the lecturers enjoy that, and they sort of live for that as well. As far as and now that sort of led to my professional job where I'm doing market research in the real world. So we sort of act to inform policy decisions, but we do that through consumer surveys, doing both quant and qual, as well as doing desktop analysis to ask research questions, big and small. So if you want to understand why consumers purchase a certain type of product in an export market, what are the sort of credence qualities behind that? That's the things that we're researching, as well as it might be framework things to try and understand what sustainability does or doesn't mean, as well as little nitty gritty things like sort of what is the overview of this market or of this product. So it's really diverse skills that have sort of built off of my masters that I'm working on in the background are sort of useful, even though they're completely different. My master's is in political marketing, which is quite niche, or at least that's what my thesis is based in. That is not taught by coursework. It's purely research based. So it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of critical comments backwards and forwards about sort of why I'm doing this and so on. And it's challenging, but I'm really enjoying it thus far. So yes, if anyone has any questions, please flick them through.
Thanks, Lachlan. I really like your story, because sometimes when people are coming into our office and they're exploring programs, they might not know about a research pathway, or perhaps fully be able to wrap their head around how it might connect to career opportunities later on. And I think you articulated that really well. And I think it's important to note too that there's no wrong pathway either in terms of what it is that you're going to go on and do in terms of your program. They're all valuable, they're all valid. It's just a case of choosing the right thing that fits with your learning style and that hopefully will drive you forward and want to learn more. And that passion will come through and drive you into the careers and things that you want to achieve after you've completed your studies. So that's a really good story. Thank you, Lachlan. Alzena, we've not forgotten about you. You're our final student panelist before I put over the Q&A to our attendees. If you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about your journey. You're doing the Master of Professional Accounting, and of course, I realize you're also working as an accountant at the same time. So learning a little bit about that would be great.
Sure. So I will take over from here for a few minutes. You've got to bear up with me. Many students actually feel that an accountant's job is just sitting at a desk and just looking at the numbers and observing what it is. But I'll give you a backdrop to that. I was a financial analyst prior to completing or planning to do my accountancy here. And the main idea with being an analyst is you have the numbers in front of you and all you have to do is understand why they exist. But somehow I found this difference between understanding the numbers and actually bringing them up to a certain page for you to analyze them. And for me, that was the game change in my life. I was working at Morgan Stanley Fund Services, and then I moved on to an H&I firm, and I worked in London for about a year. And I realized that working just as an analyst at one point sort of made me feel, no, I think I can do better. I think I can contribute better and not just look at numbers like that as it is. And I decided to take up accountancy. And when I first started into it, it was a nightmare because I had a lot to do. And it was so difficult because I had 4+ courses in that first quarter. But then I started to realize that this is how it's going to be. And I actually started to love it simply because I knew what I wanted to be in life. And that's what drew me to the course. I then wanted to apply mind to matter, and I actually landed up on a job, which is an accountant role for part-time work. And I managed to put mind to matter in that job. And today I'm recently promoted as well. So I'm really, really proud to learn it and actually being able to apply it. I mean, students get confused. I was the confused person at one point in time, but today I'm actually very happy that I've taken up this course. Needless to say, Victoria has actually added the CA pathway. So while you're doing your master's, you can actually become a chartered accountant by completing your technical modules while you're studying. And then all you need is a 3 years experience to complete your so-called articleship. which then converts you into a chartered accountant way earlier than anyone else if you choose this course. Be open to questions. Thank you.
Right. Well, that's a great story too. And to me, that really signifies sometimes you might shy away from something because you thought, oh, you know, I don't know whether that's a particularly good fit. But then when you embrace it fully, as you have, it realizes success in all kinds of formats. So anyone who's listening to that story now, you know, I really encourage you to think about diverse ranges of programs, because you just never know. You might really fit and align with something that you might not have thought of previously. Okay, so that's a lot of talking from everybody here. I am now going to put it to everybody who's attending to send in some questions using the Q&A function, and I'm hoping that we will be able to answer them effectively. So it's over to you, attendees. Please send in some questions. I'm looking at the question box anxiously now, thinking, well, soon there's going to be a deep probing question. Let me have a look here.
Can I just say, in terms of careers, I always thought that I wanted to be a scientist, and I had that goal in mind since I was like maybe 13, and it's only when I got into the workforce and I found this completely other thing, business analysis, which involved like a lot of the same kind of things in terms of being really inquisitive and methodology and all of that sort of thing. And then I looked into it a bit more and found out that I could make way more money and have a lot more career options. And then I found this course. So sometimes you end up in places that you didn't expect, but I'm hoping it will be worthwhile in the long term. I've already got a lot more career prospects than I ever had as a science undergrad.
Yeah, that's true. And I imagine that your background in science, though, with that would have lent itself nicely to that Master of Professional Business Analysis. Now, I've just had this question leap up in my screen here. I feel like I'm Ellen DeGeneres, only not as good or not as successful and not as wealthy, but I'll try and get the question answered here. This question says, I'm interested in the Masters in Public Policy. Is it possible to switch between full-time and part-time? Yes, it is possible to do that. Quite often our public policy master's students are in full-time work. So that would be perfectly normal because life happens. And obviously the Master in Public Policy is taught in a block format as well. So that lends itself to part-time study particularly well. And then another component of that question that I've just got in front of me is it possible to, oh no, I've read that one. So can you do one paper in one semester? Yes. And then later do some more? Absolutely, you can. That means that you would be able to plan out your year and you could do, let's say, for argument's sake, one in one trimester, a couple of courses in a second trimester, and maybe even do one in the summer trimester. Really, the thing that comes into that is what courses you want to do and in which trimester they're running. To think about your planning. So I hope that answers your question and that you heard that okay. I've got another question just come up here. Where are we here? This is a question from a great student that I've had the pleasure of meeting earlier, and he's written here, this question is to all the panelists. If you can wind back the clock to the time when you're about to start your study with your current knowledge, what would you have done differently? Would you have chosen a different course? I'll put that to the panel.
I can answer that one. Yeah. I wouldn't have chosen a different course, but I didn't take the advice of who's now my supervisor, my colleague, Jennifer. She said, don't do 4 papers a trimester. She said that's the craziest thing to do. I took 4 papers a trimester and it was the craziest thing to do. The workload was heavy, very heavy, but because most people in the Masters of Information Studies only take 1 or 2 papers a trimester, and that's what they're used to. But I wanted to get through it a little bit quicker. But, you know, I managed, but at the end, I was writing, at the end of each trimester, I was writing about 10,000 words for essays and across the board. So yeah, don't do 4 papers a trimester unless you really, really want to get through it.
Okay. Anyone else, one of the panelists, want to share?
I'd like to add that part as well.
Okay.
For me, despite the current knowledge that I have, I think I wouldn't change my course because I actually love it. In terms of the workload, I think, yes, it's been quite extensive because at one point in time, I had to choose like 6 papers in the trimester, and I was still working part-time, I mean, in the same job which I'm in now, and it was quite tedious. But I think the basic instinct is time management. If you can do that, I think you can work into any field, go into any sort of master's course, and you'll still be able to get through because you've been expected to be serious about the role that you choose and what you want to be in life. And the best way is the very first thing, and that's time management from my end.
Alzena, I've also had a question here from a participant. I'm going to use their language here because I love how they've written it.
Yeah, sure.
They have 2 burning questions for you. So this is awesome. What is the best advice you can give to students who do not come from an accounting background in order to succeed in the MPA program? And a second component to their question is, this is quite detailed, so I hope you can answer this. In 2 out of the 5 trimesters, students take 5 papers or courses, which is a workload of 75 hours per week, which is quite a lot. So how did you manage this large workload?
All right, so I will try to answer both the questions in one go, but if I do get methodical, do not kill me. So the first is, all right, I'm sorry, I think I missed the question. Where is it? Yeah, I see it. Sorry about that. So first is, the best advice that I could give you is actually brushing up on some bookkeeping skills prior to doing your MPA. It's not a mandate for the course, but it's best to understand how the entries are performed so that you can know its effect and understanding within the course. The second question, it is quite technical because you tend to have, as I said before, you've got like 6+ subjects within that one trimester, and it does get tedious. But again, it all boils down to time management and sometimes a few hours of less sleep. I like to put that way, because what happens is, if you are planning to work part-time and study full-time and have 6+ courses in that first trimester or whichever trimester you've taken, it does get tedious. But there are options to actually diversify those courses and put those subjects into different trimesters based on your understanding or your need, or maybe your pressures at various areas. So it depends on how you decide to take up this course and how serious you are about the course, because it is honestly no joke, but it's very helpful. It's worth the efforts by the end of your course. I'm almost towards the end of the course, and I'm really happy that I took this decision. I hope that helps.
No, that absolutely helps. I've got another question here that I'll just read out. And after we've answered this question, I'm mindful, Lachlan, that I did hear you start to speak in the background. So we will come back to you because
okay. I was just going to say that with the courses, they do vary across different programs. So what is 4 courses in one may not be the same as what you're doing. Just as, as a side note, because like at least for us, it's pretty standard that everyone does 4 courses. Not to detract from Lara's statement, I'm sure it's a lot harder for her.
No,
yeah.
Well, yeah, it was intense and that is the most intense. You're actually not allowed to do. You're technically not allowed to do more than 3 in my course, in the MIS course. Yeah.
Awesome. The next question here, just working my way through these, and apologies if you're looking at this, you're thinking, my gosh, Ellen DeGeneres would at least know how to use the Q&A function. I am getting my head around it slowly but surely. This question says, for someone working full-time and looking to study a Masters of Business, that would be Masters of Business Professional with a finance focus. So I'm thinking that might be the finance specialization, where you do the 3 specialization courses incorporated into that part-time. Roughly how much time needs to be dedicated weekly to get through the course? I think I can answer that one. it's a little bit hard to answer precisely because how you navigate work and your working style is quite individual. And of course, part-time study might depend on whether you're doing one course or two courses, but you should be really allocating anything from 10 to 15 hours a week per course. I'm just going to put that to the panel. Would you say that's a reasonable work allocation per course?
I think it depends on the course, and also it kind of depends on who you are as a person, what your goals are. You know, if you want to do your course and you just want to get pretty good grades, middle of the road grades, then maybe that's the amount of time that you would want to spend on it. But if you are aiming for an A+, then maybe you have to spend a little bit more time. And if you're the type of person who thinks C's get degrees, then spend a little bit less time. You just kind of have to figure it out as you go, and make sure that you are allocating yourself the time that you need, and make sure that you're also planning your time really wisely.
That's a great reflection. Yeah. I think a key message in all of this is planning your time carefully. And I can greatly appreciate there's probably a lot of people who have joined us who are balancing careers, they've got whānau commitments. So that is a challenge, managing your time. However, for so many of the professional programs offered by Victoria, they are at least taught in a way that allows for that block management approach to learning, which I think makes it a little bit more manageable. And in some of our disciplines, not all, but in some, of course, you've got the option of doing things on campus or online. So that creates a little bit of flexibility as well. Now I have another.
To add a bit for John here. Sorry to cut you short.
No, no problem.
Just to give you an idea of how Victoria helps you, irrespective of how you are as a person or how you wish to study, and the number of hours you wish to put into. During COVID times, we were forced to go online at one point in time, and now we're back to going offline and actually being in the class, which I totally prefer. We were actually given a hardship fund for us to, just bring ourselves up to speed if you don't have Wi-Fi connection, or maybe you don't have the correct technical gadgets for yourself to, be a part of the course. We were given those options, and it was really helpful, especially for international students who come here and they wish to make their ends meet while they're studying. I think it was really helpful at that point. So I'd just like to add that point in there. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for that, Alzena. I appreciate that. Okay, I've got another question here. Can anyone speak a bit about the Masters of Global Business? Well, that would be me. I can't do a massively detailed summary about that program because there's a lot of moving parts to it. But what I will say is that the Master of Global Business is a program that is really tailored to new graduates who may or may not have a background in business. It does have very much an international focus. One thing I'll point out that's a little bit of a fishhook in planning is if you are coming into the Master of Global Business as a student who might have done an undergrad commerce degree and you've already extensively studied international business management and marketing, you'll need a bit of guidance in terms of how you plan your courses. If you're not a student with a commerce background directly, then that is also perfectly okay, because as I said earlier, this program is designed to really appeal to people who don't have a background in business disciplines, irrespective of what you've been studying, in much the same way many of our professional programs are. And that program will therefore be very structured around a core of international business courses and will allow for a specialization of 3 courses, bearing in mind that some of the specializations, for example, finance and economics, may require prerequisite courses. So I guess a key takeaway is happy to walk you through that Master of Global Business program if you want to reach out to me via email, and I can contact you after this so that that's easier for you to do, and I can walk you through much more detailed information about that program. What I will say is that the Master of Global Business has proven to be a hugely popular program among our recent graduates. So I really think it's a great option if that's your background. If you're well established in your career, then there might be other pathways that you'd like to consider, and I'd happily talk about those with you as well. So I hope that answers in part your question. As I say, I'll email you to follow up on that. Okay, I've got another question here. This is a great question, actually, that I think will apply to lots of people who are attending. So I'll put this out to everyone in the panel. Well, there's quite a few questions here. The first question is, which experiences, courses or activities that you participated in while you've been studying, while you're at university, did you find had the most benefit for you in terms of your future career after graduation? Why don't I just throw that out to panelists and see who answers that?
I'll start. So one thing that the Masters of Professional Business Analysis has is the ITC school brings in speakers every week, which is really cool. They're all from industry, so you get to have a chat to them, maybe add them on LinkedIn afterwards, see what their career's like, and then, you know, if you make a good connection, hopefully you can kind of be informed about roles that come up in their company, or kind of just gain insights from them. Also, as like an additional extra, you can be paired with a mentor as part of their mentorship program. I have a really awesome mentor. He works in, I think it's like Argentina, so I meet him at midnight my time, so I can get him at lunch his time, which is a little bit inconvenient, but he's really good and I've been learning a lot of him. And then something that I haven't done yet, but I will do, is that in our last trimester, we have a project which is like in business or coordinates with business / industry. And I'm really looking forward to that because it will give me some real life, you know, experience working on problems, and a lot of people get opportunities from those interactions as well. So there's just a lot of opportunities to meet with industry and big industry players and make an impression on them, which, you know, even though it might not lead to something directly, networking is just so powerful in finding out about job opportunities, and also making impressions that, you know, could lead to future opportunities.
Thanks for that, Rhiannon. That was a really good description of how your course connects to future employment opportunities. I'm mindful that there's a few questions backing up here. So question 2 on this list, because I've put it live, can be answered by the panel, but I'm going to go to question 3 on here, which is a great question as well, which is noted to be most suitable for you, Lachlan, given your sort of public policy, political maneuverings in your career, which you've got well underway. And the question is, how do you feel about a career in public policy? And would you say or describe this career as being intellectually engaging, varied and creative, where no 2 days are the same? Only you can answer that because you're in the thick of things. And yeah, what are some of the things that you love about the job? And maybe what are some of the downsides of the career that you might have noticed at this early outset?
Sounds good. I'm still at work, so I'll be careful not to say anything negative too loudly. No, I mean, I'm fortunate because what I do, although I am a policy analyst, I don't analyze a lot of policy. Because I perform market research, I'm quite cross-cutting. So I'm talking to people all across the business, which is really interesting. All of my training and previous work experiences, although to a less professional extent, have been public sector. And there are some very firm differences. I think a lot of people are built for the public sector and really enjoy that. That said, these days it's not too hard if you do a few years in public or in private. Swapping over is by no means impossible. I do really enjoy it, partly because for me it is very different. There's a lot of short turnarounds for me because I'm less working on legislation like a lot of my my peers. I'm I'm helping to provide information that might inform those policy decisions and affect how we sort of use our policy toolbox. So for me, it is, well, I find it stressful but rewarding, because there's a lot of short sort of questions that need answering. If someone needs to know something, it's come and talk to us and we'll try and do it with rigor, but in an efficient manner. I'm still quite early on in my career, so I don't want to start talking for a whole career path, but I'm enjoying it so far. I expect in my career I'll work across public and private, but I think it is really, really useful. And the way, from my experience and in my opinion, the skills are a lot of business-based skills. So I've come from the Masters of Commerce, so that's the sort of angle I bring, less a sort of policy background. Because we're making a lot of business decisions and decisions that impact business across New Zealand's economy, and that is the same, at least in similar sort of comparable countries like Australia in their public service. And I can also talk really quickly to point 1 and 2 of that question, mindful of time. In the job that I got, they were looking for someone who is holistically valuable, not just sort of has one narrow skill that they can do really well. So for me, I had a background in the Advertising Standards Authority. I did debating. I'm still ranked, I think, 300th-ish in the world for sailing, which I competed in during my Masters, which is challenging, as well as other sort of sports commitments, like I do football and I do touch rugby as well. And I had a radio show at the Victoria University radio station as well. So just getting engaged and saying yes to those opportunities, which a lot of them come up through the courses at Vic and through being around University of Wellington, is definitely helpful, because at least for my job, they were looking for someone who is holistically sort of valuable, not just, one skill set. So I would say put your hand up for everything, but think, obviously some decisions might be more useful than others. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Oh, thanks for sharing that, Lachlan. I appreciate that. That's quite a journey for you. Now I've got another question down here, so I'm figuring out the answer live function here. Well done, John. Where an attendee has asked, I would like to do an internship as part of my study, and also to increase my job prospects post-graduation. And I think it's a really important theme coming through with everybody that I speak to about programs, because people are getting ready to make a massive commitment to a study program, and obviously they are focused on their career. So I can totally understand why this is critical to everyone's planning. And the question is there anyone here on the panel who did an internship? What's their experience, and what was their experience, and would they recommend it in terms of increasing post-graduation job prospects? Rhiannon, you might have done one as a consultancy, possibly. Lara, I don't know whether you did one.
I did an internship at Archives New Zealand, where they just got their biggest ever deposit of land transport records, and I ended up sitting boxing and transcribing and all of the information into their database, and it was good for making connections with Archive New Zealand, because obviously they're one of the biggest employers of archivists, and just seeing the everyday nature of what archiving is about. So it's not just sitting behind your computer, you're up and down ladders and lugging boxes and stuff like that. So it was great, and I would do it, and I would highly suggest anyone who, particularly if you haven't had any experience in your field, to do one.
Thanks for that. Yeah, often we get a lot of questions about internships versus research projects versus consultancy projects. And I think you summarized that perfectly, Lara, that when you're doing an internship, you're actually placed in the business doing the actual work. And that might mean doing some work that's not fabulous, but you are exposed to this working reality and getting a sense of what that work culture is. So internships are a fantastic opportunity. Some of you who are attending might have seen the language consultancy project. Now that's slightly different from an internship, and in simple terms, we have great partnerships as part of our programs with local businesses, NGOs, etc., who come on to campus and put business problems to students who then have to consult and come up with solutions. So that's a very simple explanation of a consultancy project. So that's quite different because you're not working on site, as it were, but nonetheless you are exposed to that industry and you do make connections that sort of open up pathways to other networking opportunities. And then, of course, undertaking a research project is not necessarily meaning that you are part of a working team with a role. You might be on site researching a particular phenomena, and that in itself is a different kind of learning reality. But again, it's still exposing you to a particular work context, and perhaps your research project is going to be something that work context really wants to embrace and learn more about. And that's the thing that's going to lead to a pathway to a career. So that kind of reflects on some of the things that Lachlan was sharing with us with his own research. So I have another question here from a participant, and this is really relating to Alzena. And the question is, if you could talk about this, Alzena, and that is, what are the job prospects like in this post-COVID environment for those students who are completing a Masters of Professional Accounting in New Zealand?
Sure. So with regards to job prospects, well, they are available in the market if you go to search for them. That's the very first thing I'd like to say. Point two is, I think it's got to do with the way as to how you portray yourself for the job. So there's no job certainty anywhere, and it gets quite tedious when you try to portray yourself in a market which is dying out anyway at every instance. It's just how you make a difference. So the key is, I think, making connections, building the clientele, and then getting forward for a job. If I have to put it into perspective, almost prior to COVID, or rather just a month prior to COVID, when we didn't know what's going to hit us, I started searching for jobs, and I got the job within 4 months of the course, despite not completing the course. So, I mean, that speaks volumes. If you know how to portray yourself, I think it works wonders. And you need to also establish the ground that there are situations where not every person gets the job, but you need to still buck yourself up and understand how can you do better for any job that's available. So in terms of prospects, there are prospects, because despite the COVID troubles, I think every business is trying to understand how they can keep their world afloat. And accountants are highly responsible for that bit, because we're not just looking at numbers, we're actually trying to fine tune them and understand where you can cut costs and, you know, make a livelihood out of whatever is messy out here. So I think that would be my answer to that question. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, and I think one of the core messages that I picked up on that story, Alzena, was that it's about how you're presenting yourself and how you're selling your strengths, as it were. And sometimes that doesn't come naturally to everybody, and there are great resources on campus to learn how to do that. As a side example, we recently had a professional development session for some of our executive Masters of Business Administration students that was actually put on by our careers service. And that was about how to network, how to use LinkedIn effectively, and a whole lot of guidance on the art of networking in order to increase the likelihood that you'll be offered jobs, sort of in unofficial channels, if you like. So not having to go through Seek, or not having to go through public kind of job advertising contexts. So I just thought I'd bring that up because there are so many resources for students.
Yeah, in fact, there was a medium for me to understand how to first chalk your CV into a market which you haven't tapped before. And I did route myself through Careers and Employment of Victoria, and I understood what is expected from a CV at this juncture of your life when you're here and you've not penetrated into the market before. So you have no one at the first instance to talk to or understand how the market works. But I think that was the very first icebreaker for me. And from there on, I think I've built excellent connections till date. I'm hoping that I can put them to use someday, but it's been great. Yeah.
Oh, that's great feedback. So I have another question here which relates to careers, which is tailored to you, Lachlan, but other people might be able to reflect on it in their contexts. And Lachlan, that is, let me just put this up live here for you so you can see it. Are there also a variety of ages and experiences of, so diverse age range of people in the policy analyst field? Because this person has got extensive experience working in consultancy. And how does that work for people who want to change careers and work in a policy context if they go on and do a professional program like the Master of Public Policy as a career change? Lachlan, are you able to comment on whether the reality of policy analyst employment and jobs from your perspective is all about recent graduates, or are you seeing a sort of more diverse audience working in that context? I hope I've put that correctly. It's a great question.
From my experience, and I can't speak for all ministries and departments, yes, it is quite diverse. The grad program is quite small. From my experience, for most government agencies, because there are, although there is a finite group, there's a group of policy analysts and policy people who do circulate around. I'm one of the younger people here. I think I'm the youngest in my team and directorate by about 5 or 10 years. But there's lots of people coming in from industry as well as from postgraduate programs. Especially in my team, there's a lot of people who have gone through PhDs or masters at universities and come in. So yes, it does depend on where you want to go. But as far as applying goes, as far as I'm aware, most government agencies have a recruitment app or website that you can go to, and that shows all of the roles that you might be applicable for. And my recommendation generally, if you're applying for government, if you think it applies to you, apply. I didn't go through the grad program. I just applied for a job and I got it. And I think doing a professional program postgraduate, really valuable, because that does actually carry quite a bit of weight. And as well, going on what was said before, presenting yourself in a good light is really helpful, especially in the sort of government policy area.
If I can just add on to that, I worked at the Department of Conservation for almost 3 years, and I also worked in some Crown Research Institutes, which are kind of government, but kind of not. Government organisations love secondments, which is when you take someone out of their job somewhere and shove them in a different job where they can learn a whole bunch of new things. So government organisations within them, they don't expect everyone to know 100% of everything all of the time. In fact, they love shuffling people around so that they can learn new skills. So things aren't like pointed towards like younger graduates at all. In fact, they love people with diverse experiences. And as I say, for employers as a whole, the main thing that they love is soft skills, which actually people who have been in the workplace before have a big advantage over graduates because they've already developed all those soft skills from working before. So I would say that like it's absolutely not a disadvantage to be older or to not have experience in that particular field, especially when you're going to work for government, because then they are looking for those other skills as well. And because they have kind of lower expectations, especially because they don't pay as much as the private industry. So, you're in an almost a better position.
Thanks, Rhiannon. I agree with that too. And I must say that in the day-to-day course of working down here in the professional programs office, that it's very common for me to meet with people who come from extremely diverse backgrounds. Today alone, I've met with somebody who came in had been working in a science context. They'd been doing an environmental science program, and they were doing a complete career shift where they had sort of no particular policy experience at all, but they were now wanting to do a Master of Public Policy because they realized that's what they wanted to do. And I was looking at them thinking, wow, they've got so much additional kind of career capital that they can bring to that role. And that lends itself to amazing discussions and kind of student community collectiveness with this diverse feeding in of people from different backgrounds. So I would actively encourage anybody who's thinking about changing their career direction to pursue whatever it is that they want to study. At the end of the day, all roads lead to government in Wellington. Everybody's connected to it somehow. So I think everybody's experience is relevant to the realities of policy.
Yeah, definitely don't undervalue that range and career capital that you've already built up. Like, range is so valuable.
Absolutely. Now I've got 2 more questions here to answer, and I'm going to wrap it up after that, but would actively encourage everybody to email in as many questions as you like so we can get a little bit more specific on particular courses, because I know we might have glossed over some of the details here. That's no problem at all. And of course, people are welcome to book in a time to come and chat with me if that's something that you feel comfortable doing. But back to these questions, I have one here, and that is, can the Master of Professional Accounting Chartered Accountancy pathway be completed by those who have an accounting undergraduate major who are a domestic student? Now, I can actually answer that. As I understand it, yes, they are now encouraging students who have an accounting major and a BCom to apply for the Master of Professional Accounting precisely for that reason, so that you can undertake that chartered accountancy pathway. And we're finding that this is just anecdotal feedback, that in the job marketplace where accounting positions are concerned, that Master of Professional Accounting really is a well-recognized, and perhaps this is a personal opinion thing shared with us, preferred by some employers versus a comparable undergraduate pathway. So the short answer is yes. So I would encourage the person who posted that great question just to reach out to me so I can give you some more precise information on what that would look like in terms of an enrollment and course planning reality for you. So please do that. And here's another question. This is another question about the Master of Global Business. It's a bit of a hard question for me to answer. The question is, can you tell after COVID, what kind of changes in the tourism industry there might be in terms of employment we might expect, and what kind of new opportunities this situation has brought or might bring? Or I can see a hand going up there. Is that Rhiannon?
Yeah, sorry. So
No, fire
not
away.
that specialization, but I was still at Doc during the first bit of kind of the COVID shake-up, and I was working in the concessions part, so dealing quite closely with a lot of tourism operators, especially in the South Island. And the biggest thing that we talked about was how they're going to have to change from focusing solely on the international market to having things for like our tourists, like people within the country. So, you know, a lot of experiences are really not geared towards New Zealanders, helicopter flights, you know, all of that sort of stuff, which is traditionally really expensive, and also a lot of guided walking. So us Kiwis, if we want to go on a track, then we'll just give it a go. You know, we'll just go by ourselves. But you know, the tourists, they want to go with someone, and they want to pay someone to explain everything to make sure they don't fall down a cliff. You know, so there's going to have to be a lot of rethinking about how they target their activities and also the cost of their activities. And that's something that we were considering a lot in pricing our concessions and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, huge shifts, but also a lot of new opportunities to work better within their communities and find new niches.
Thanks for that, Rhiannon. And I'll also add to that question as well. Watching people come into the programs at the moment and starting with their orientation and everybody setting out on their study journey, I actually think it's a really exciting time to start studying now in relation to this great question about, well, what's employment going to look like in a tourism context and indeed other contexts after COVID? Because you're actually going to be working on those problems, discussing those problems, and hopefully solving the problems that we now have left in the wake of COVID. So it's actually amazingly timely to be studying, because you're going to reflect on your career and go, well, I learned how to problem solve and deal with those changes. And I actually came up with solutions and innovations as part of my learning journey, which I then took into a career context. So yeah, things are a little bit scary and uncertain at the moment, but there is certainly an advantage and value in studying at the moment and working on these very problems, particularly in the tourism space, I think. That's something that I've noticed, and I think that will be of enormous value to people coming into our programs at the moment. I'm mindful that there is one question here, which is just a general statement. Master of Public Policy. I don't have a public policy student with us. So what I would say to that is, I'm hoping that I can just reach out to you by email and start a bit of a conversation, and would happily have a one-on-one Zoom or appointment with you to really get into the nuts and bolts of the public policy program. We are going to have to wrap up this webinar because we've gone past the 6:15 mark. I would just like to say to everybody who's been on our panel, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And also thank you so much to everybody who asked questions. They were great questions. It's an interesting time, as I've said earlier, to be studying. There's uncertainty, but there's excitement that goes with that. There's definitely loads of opportunities that I can see in Wellington at the moment. I can see that the employment market is very robust. So there's lots of positive signs about what lies ahead for our future graduates. So I think everybody should be highly motivated by that. But for now, I'm going to stop talking. And as I said before, I will reach out to everybody to follow up on any additional questions. But from me, it's going to be ka kite.